The things we take for granted because we do them so routinely every day and it's so easy, evaporate during a storm. And if people don't prepare ahead of time, they're really going to struggle.
Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family rode it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike.
And
what it taught us. I am very excited. We're about to start our Hurricane Town Hall in just a few minutes. So join us. We want to hear your questions, and I want to hear from you.
A reminder that, hurricanes aren't just a coastal problem in the United States. We can have significant impacts from heavy rainfall, freshwater flooding, storm surge, tornado outbreaks, just the winds of the tropical cyclone itself, and all those hazards can come into play with the same storm.
The things we take for granted because we do them so routinely every day and it's so easy, evaporate during a storm. And if people don't prepare ahead of time, they're really going to struggle.
Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family rode it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike. And what it taught us.
A reminder that, hurricanes aren't just a coastal problem in the United States. We can have, significant impacts from heavy rainfall, freshwater flooding, storm surge, tornado outbreaks, just the winds of the tropical cyclone itself, and all those hazards can come into play with the same storm.
things we take for granted because we do them so routinely every day and it's so easy, evaporate during a storm. And if people don't prepare ahead of time, they're really going to struggle.
Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family rode it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike. And what it taught us. I am very excited. We're about to start our Hurricane Town Hall in just a few minutes. So join us. We want to hear your questions, and I want to hear from you.
A reminder that, hurricanes aren't just a coastal problem in the United States. We can have, significant impacts from heavy rainfall, freshwater flooding, storm. A reminder that, hurricanes aren't just a coastal problem in the United States. We can have, significant impacts from heavy rainfall, freshwater flooding, storm surge, tornado outbreaks, just the winds of the tropical cyclone itself, and all those hazards can come into play with the same storm.
The things we take for granted because we do them so routinely every day and it's so easy, evaporate during a storm. And if people don't prepare ahead of time, they're really going to struggle.
Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family rode it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike. And what it taught us. I am very excited. We're about to start our Hurricane Town Hall in just a few minutes. So join us. We want to hear your questions, and I want to hear from you.
A reminder that, hurricanes aren't just a coastal problem in the United States. We can have, significant impacts from heavy rainfall, freshwater flooding, storm surge, tornado outbreaks, just the winds of the tropical cyclone itself, and all those hazards can come into play with the same storm.
The things we take for granted because we do them so routinely every day, and it's so easy, evaporate during a storm. And if people don't prepare ahead of time, they're really going to struggle.
Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family wrote it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike. And what it taught us. It is time for Doctor and the Dude, but don't be alarmed. That is not Josh Morgerman.
I'm not the dude.
That's meteorologist Devon Sharifi. She's here with me today. And also, let's bring in Josh Morgerman, our favorite hurricane hunter, for this special edition of Doctor and the Dude. Josh, how are you doing today?
Real good. This is my favorite part of the week when I get to nerd out on live TV with you.
Yes. Well, let's talk about what we're doing. This is a town hall. So we are going to be on for the next at least half an hour. We're going to be in and out on live television, but we're going to be live on our social media platforms the entire time, and we want to hear from you. So click on, we actually have a QR code that you can put up. When we put it up, you take a look at it. Take a picture of it with your phone. Even I know how to do that. It'll take, there it is, and you can go to our social media platforms. We want your questions, we want your comments, and we're going to answer them. And Devon is going to help us kind of mediate, and she's going to ask questions and also keep Josh and me on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, so pretty much whatever your favorite social media platform is, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, we're on all of those right now, and we'll be on them for the next little bit until we can answer all of your questions. And when we kind of posed that this was happening, we asked a couple of questions, and we already wanted to bring some of those to the attention before some folks live started asking questions. The first one people want to know from both of you is, do you think that this will be an above average season? Some of our viewers, Kara Thacker, said, I sure hope not. So
I agree with that too. Josh, I'll let you hit your first swing at this one.
Pressure's on. So it's always hard to know, but the reputable forecasting organizations like Colorado State University and NOAA are saying, because of the various conditions, including the Enzo state, which means whether we have El Nino and La Nina and stuff like that, all of those conditions are suggesting on the high side of normal to a little above normal, and that seems reasonable to me. And just one other thing I want to add is, hurricanes, they sort of, if you look at history, they seem to run in 20 to 30 or 20 to 40 year cycles. And unfortunately for the United States, we seem to be in a very busy sort of what we call a multi-decadal cycle right now. So I don't see any reason why that's going to let up anytime soon. So I think that I expect, bottom line, another busy year where folks on the Gulf and East Coast really need to keep an eye.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, the forecasts that we've had, and you said it very well, reputable forecasts, because you're going to see things online, especially on social media, which is why we're trying to get out there more to give people kind of the real assessment. Now, having said that, though, even the forecasts from all of the experts, while we're leaning towards that above, maybe slightly above average year, there's still that little risk maybe 10% that we have a below average season. And so we always have to keep that in mind. So it's kind of like, sometimes I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. As a meteorologist, we do that a lot. But another thing to remember is none of these forecasts have anything to do with how many landfalls we're going to have here in the U.S. That's not the forecast. That we're talking about the entire basin at this point. And so that's why there's just a lot more variables that are going on here than just, are we going to have an active season or not?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I think that's a really important point because, I mean, we look at the forecast and we're saying, okay, this is how many we could potentially have based on average, but people really want to know what the impact is going to be, and sometimes you don't get the impacts when you get a hurricane.
Yep, it only takes one. It just takes one to ruin your year, right, Josh?
Exactly, and I'm glad you both hit on this point because it's really important. You could have a super busy year where everything stays out to sea, or you could have a year where it's like a funeral parlor, like almost nothing forms, but that one thing that does form and hit the U.S. is catastrophic. And a good example is 1992, the year of Hurricane Andrew. That was a dead year, but that was the year that a Category 5 hurricane smashed South Florida. So lesson there.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, let's go to question number 2.
Yeah,
we've got warmed up here.
We've got a question here from Pam on YouTube, so thanks for sending that in. She wants to know, Josh, specifically, which Cona's Chase was most memorable for you and why?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, that's
Josh,
a great question.
We have 2 minutes left here on live television, and then we're going to be switching back over only to social media. So just giving that heads up. Carry on.
I would have to say Hurricane Michael, one of the 4 known examples of a Category 5 hurricane smashing the mainland United States and just being right where it came in, going through the eye, experiencing that unbelievable eye wall, those unbelievable winds in an American city, in Panama City. I'll never forget that. That was really something. And that was probably my most memorable in the United States.
Do you have a most memorable?
I do. And it's Rita, which happened right after Katrina. So I forecasted for Katrina and spent a lot of time obviously dealing with that situation. But Rita then, just a couple of weeks later, less than that, was heading right towards Houston. So it was a massive storm also. And that was the first time when I actually had my family evacuate and said, you guys, let's just have you leave early. And so that was very memorable because once the storm actually hit, it went a little bit east of Houston. But it was the first time that I realized how prepared and unprepared I was for a tropical thing. There was no gas. My family by that point, they were up in Waco, where we had quite a few friends because both my wife and I went to Baylor University. And I realized if I wanted to go to them, I was going to have to bike. And, and I was a triathlete at the time, so it's kind of like, that actually sounds like fun. But I realized that I'd also have to carry my stuff with me. So Rita was the most impactful on me because it changed everything about how I got prepared. I have a plan for staying home, and I have a plan if I have to evacuate. And I also have a third plan if I have to evacuate and we're never coming back because we think everything's going to be gone. So I made 3 plans from that point forward. All right, we're out of time for right now. Head over, click on the QR code. We'll be on social media, and we'll see you soon. All right, so we're back now. We're staying here on social media. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing this. In fact, it's kind of like we have, Devon to help us along. And now that we're not on television, now we can tell you the real stuff. All right, all right. So Josh, I don't want you to hold back anymore. So let's move on to the next question.
Okay, we've got Pam in South Carolina, still on our YouTube. So Pam, thank you so much for joining us here. How will Saharan dust, the Saharan dust track, impact the tropical system formation? So we can start with you, Dr. Jim, and then we'll get your take as well.
It is the one thing that can mess up the hurricane forecast that nobody has a grasp on, because we don't know how much dust is going to come across from all the way from the Sahara. And that's a whole other issue as well, because what are the storms going to be like? What are the thunderstorms in Africa? And then, so again, it's one of those things that we just don't have a grasp on. Now, I will say this, though. Typically, The dust is worse towards the beginning of the season, and it kind of lessens, or there's pockets of less dust, and so the storms will form in between there. But at this point, we have no idea what the dust is going to do. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you started with Dr. Jim on this one because his area of expertise. I find the Saharan dust topic very frustrating because I don't completely understand it. And I think that Dr. Jim hit on why. It's because it's kind of a random wild card factor in the mix when we look at, okay, is a cyclone, a tropical cyclone going to form and is it going to threaten the United States? There's all these pieces that have to time with each other. There's, okay, what's coming off Africa? Where are we in what's called the MJO cycle? And then you throw the Saharan dust in and it's just another factor that could kind of just throw sand in the gears, which of course throwing sand in the gears when it comes to developing tropical cyclones, that's a good thing, of course. But yeah, it's just so hard to figure it out. Like Dr. Jim said, it's more of a factor right now early in the season.
You know, I've also been noticing there's more research being done over in Africa. Because if you could forecast that more or better, then you can understand. But now we're talking global weather patterns, you know, which is kind of different. But just like how there's an El Nino, we know that the upper level winds are going to be stronger, which tends to slow hurricane season down. So anyway, I think in the coming years, we're going to get a lot more research about the storms that are impacting the dust. And that will be something that will add into the hurricane forecast. And in the next 5-10 years, there'll be an improvement again in forecasting because we can account for the dust better.
Yeah, I think that's, something to look forward to, meteorologically speaking.
If you're a weather geek.
Yeah.
Yes, if you're geeking out on this kind of stuff, yes, absolutely. But obviously we love to talk about it.
So I really like this question here from Instagram. User Siebert asks, what states are the most affected by hurricanes? So take us through maybe your experience and just what you've seen tracking the storms. Dr. Jim, we can start with you.
Well, I mean, if you look at just averages, okay, for example, Florida averages a landfall every 0.5 years, and Texas averages a landfall at 0.8 of a year. So you would say actually more landfalls happen in Texas, but more activity. It's really an up and down kind of a thing. Also,
really
you have to remember too, Texas is bigger. Just like when you talk about lightning, you know, Texas has more lightning than anybody else because it's just bigger than anybody else. Whereas in Florida, they have a lot more lightning per capita per square inch. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, Josh. So there you go. What do you think?
Well, I look at, I'm a history nerd, as you guys know, so I'm all about the historical stats. When I'm not chasing hurricanes, I'm looking at those numbers, how many landfalls each state has, everything else. So we have good records going back to 1851, solid records, like official records about what hurricanes hit where. So Florida, actually, in terms of number of landfalls, is by far the winner. And then Texas is the solid number 2. And of course, that's largely because they both have, big coastlines, they're big targets. States like Alabama and Mississippi don't have as many just because they're really small. Mississippi and Alabama have really small targets. They're really small coastlines. Louisiana's somewhere in the middle. I'll say this, in terms of severe hurricanes, the really severe ones, worrying about those, we're talking about all of the states along the Gulf, and then going up into the lower Southeast. Once and the East Coast of the United States, of course, is very hurricane prone, and they can get hurricanes. But as you go up the East Coast, of course, they become less common and also a little less intense, especially when you get from North Carolina further north. The really industrial strength hurricanes tend to be, uncommon. In fact, North Carolina has only had one Category 4 hurricane. That was Hazel in 1954. And there's been no Category 4 hurricanes anywhere north of there, anywhere in the United States. So the whole northeastern U.S., they can get bad hurricanes, but not Cat 4s.
And what's interesting too, if you look at a map of all the hurricanes that have happened since the 1850s or whatever, almost every square inch of the United States coastline from Texas to New York and Maine has been hit by a hurricane. So can a hurricane hit anywhere on the coast? Yes, it can. But yeah, you're right. The law of averages though, and honestly, that's what we look at a lot when it comes to that, seasonal forecasting. Yeah, that's something you can really look to.
And we talked about a little bit in the beginning what both of your most memorable storms were. We also want to talk about the worst storm that you've experienced? Maybe there's overlap, maybe there's not. But one of the viewers, Chris Saunier, said he lived in Cameron Parish, Louisiana when Laura made landfall in 2020. On the coast at the time of landfall, we measured 165 mile per hour sustained and peak gusts of 185. So that was his experience, and he wants to know your guys' experience.
Well, mine's very easy. It's Harvey. Which wasn't even a hurricane when it made landfall in Houston. 1, 2, 3. Just kept making landfall again and again, simply because that lasted for 5 or 6 days. So for me, and just the devastation, if I had even wanted to go home from the station, I couldn't have, because there's no way to get home from that time. So for me, Harvey by far will. I even have friends that are meteorologists that left the business after Harvey, just from post-traumatic stress.
Shakes you to the core. Yeah.
It really does, and it changed me too. I'll be honest. So for me, it's definitely Harvey. Josh.
Yeah, Harvey is such a big event because, it wasn't just an epic rainfall event, but that it happened in, the nation's fourth biggest city. It's like there's no way that millions of people were going to just be so impacted by that. For me, I have to say my biggest, most crazy experiences have been outside the United States. And I would say it's tied. There's 2 in first place. One would be Super Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. It was equivalent to what we would call a high-end Category 5 hurricane. I was in a large city, basically at sea level, and the whole city got swept by a tremendous storm surge, thousands dead. So there was that one. And then the other one would be Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, which almost hit Florida. It cut north just in time, but I went through it in the Bahamas when it had sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. Strongest known landfall in North America, tied with the 1935 Labor Day hurricane in Florida. But that was just some unbelievable winds. I was in a little concrete building, and you could just feel the wind, it felt like it was going to tear the whole building apart. That was some scary stuff, and it's burned in my memory.
Yeah, that would actually burn in my memory as well. Hey, by the way, also, Dave Holder and I, which is interesting, when Ike happened, that was the first time that both of us went through a hurricane, right through the very beginning, all the way through the eye, through the end. He was out hunting it. I, of course, was working at the station. And so we're going to be airing that throughout the next couple of days, are looking back at how that was for us. And so, everyone has their stories from hurricanes. And one thing, and I know, Josh, you'll agree with this too, is anybody that I know who's actually stayed on purpose for a hurricane never will do it again. After they've gone through the one, they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize what it was really like. And if they don't have to, they'll never do it again. Josh, have you found that to be true?
100%. And I've definitely found it when you get from Category 3 and higher. If a normal person, not a weirdo weather nerd or storm chaser like me, but just a normal person, when they go through the core of a Category 3 or higher hurricane as it's coming ashore, almost always they're like, whoa, man, just you said, I'm never doing that again. That was scary. That was weird. I don't want to do that again. It really impacts people. I think a lot of people, before if you've never been in a really severe hurricane, it's hard to imagine it. You can't imagine it, just the weirdness, the energy, the craziness of it until you're in it.
A lot of times when you hear people talk about living through a tornado, they say they hear the engine like it's a train that's coming in, but you can hear it, and it does. It really does sound like a jet engine or a train. The difference with hurricanes, it's a similar loudness, but it's more of a howl. It's more of a wailing sound, and because and it lasts for hours and hours. So it's just different, but it definitely is a different sound, right, Josh? We've talked about this many times, you and I.
Absolutely. Hurricanes have a special sound. And the other thing I've noticed, though, is that to some degree, the sound of a hurricane, the voice it has, it's to some degree influenced by what's underneath it. Is it in a city? Are there power lines? Is it in an open coastal area? What kinds of trees? All those things factor in. And so you have a range. I've noticed that some hurricanes are more of a scream. Some are the howly dog sound. That's the most common one, the one you described. Some are more like a roar or a train. And that's, hurricanes. I've been in 80 hurricanes, 80 cores, and they're like people. They each have their own personality, their vibe, their sound, their voice. It's very interesting. The more hurricanes you go through, the more you realize how unique each one is.
I'm sorry for laughing, Josh, but when you say you've been through 80 hurricanes,
it's crazy.
What's wrong with you? You are definitely out there. In fact,
wait, I want to piggyback on that.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Got a good one.
I want to piggyback on that because Richard online on Facebook also wants to know, how did you even get into this? What keeps you in it? So going off of what Dr. Jim said, what's wrong with you? Let's answer the backstory.
I know Josh's story. When he was a kid, he got into it. He loved it so much that he hunted his first hurricane jumping on a train to get to where the hurricane was going. That's how dedicated he was. That's when he was young. Is that right, Josh?
Yes, it's very true. And like, I listen, I'm used to just feeling like a weirdo. I think that the hardcore storm chasers, the one that do this as their main thing in life, I would say like it's like an addiction and you're born with it. As far back as I could remember when I was a little kid, I would just get very excited by any kind of crazy weather. It just was like a drug. And the hunt, chasing it is all about just kind of getting that fix again and again. And I know that doesn't sound healthy, and I don't claim that it is healthy, but it's what drives me. And I'll tell you, I've done a lot of that drive to do that addiction has got me inside a lot of crazy storms in far corners of the earth and helped me collect a lot of really valuable data, to sort of help science and help understand these things. So there is actually some good comes of it. It's not all just about being like, sort of irresistibly drawn to them.
Excellent. Okay, we are about to go back onto live television, everybody. Stay with us. Here's all the platforms that we're on right now. We're going to be on television, and so you can click on the QR code if you want to go back that way, and we'll be right back with you, and we'll finish this story.
And here we are.
Welcome back to Doctor and the Dude special edition as we do our town hall. Now, we have been actually still on social media while we were away off of television. And if you want to ask us your questions, we're going to stay on not only during this segment, but afterwards. We're going to stay on social media for a while. So we're going to put up that QR code one more time for you to see. And when all you have to do is take a picture with the QR code that you see here, and that will take you to the social media platforms. You can click on the platform that you like the best, and then those questions are going to come to Taban, and then Taban will talk with Josh and me. And what we were just talking about offline, and now we're back on television, we're just talking about what got us into what we were doing. And we're talking about Josh, for example, started hunting hurricanes when he was very young. On the other hand, I was terrified of lightning. So I grew up out west. Both of us grew up in Southern California, and then my family, we moved to Oregon and Utah when I was growing up. I was so afraid of lightning that that's what got me going into weather. And so when I moved to Texas and I was forecasting tropical weather, honestly, the very first time I saw something pointed to me, I was as terrified as any other viewer would have been, but I was also, as a scientist, really, really curious.
Josh, were you more interested in hurricanes? I mean, was that the first thing that you were interested in, or were there other weather phenomena that piqued your interest in the realm first?
It's a great question. I think a lot of us, we become interested in what's happening in our environments. And for me, I spent my childhood and teen years on Long Island in New York. And so we would occasionally get a hurricane coming up the coast. And those events made a big impression on me. So besides just having an automatic sort of fixation on any crazy weather, that was the weather I knew. The big weather events when I was growing up were hurricanes. So I think that sparked it as well. Now, the kind that we got up in suburban New York were nothing like the kind you get down in the Gulf or, in the Caribbean, but it gave me just enough of a taste of it to just, start the addiction.
All right, we've got another question. Jason Walker, I believe this is from Twitter. Are there tornadoes that happen in the eye wall?
In the eye wall itself, I
don't think we've gotten this question before.
That is very interesting. I have to think about that for a second. It's possible. It's possible. But the eye wall itself, because it's spinning, but it seems like it's definitely be more likely outside of the eye wall as you get out away just a little bit, but it's definitely a possibility. Josh, have you ever seen that personally?
So generally, Dr. Jim, you hit the nail on the head. Tornadoes happen with hurricanes, but they tend to happen in the outer parts, in the outer rain bands, and they tend to be lower end tornadoes, like sort of like EF zeros, EF ones. Now, Milton last year was a little bit of an exception. Some of those tornadoes in the outer rain bands of Milton on the east coast of Florida, some of those were substantive fat wedge tornadoes, so that was a little unusual. Now, in terms of tornadoes in the eye wall, I will say that this is a subject of controversy. You occasionally see people just duking out this topic on social media about whether it happens or not. There are basically people who say no, it doesn't happen. The eye wall does not have tornadoes, and then people who swear that they've seen tornadoes in the eye walls. Now, in the eye wall of a severe hurricane, it's crazy. There's a lot of unbelievable turbulence. It's hard to see what's happening. Inside a tornado, inside a hurricane's core, there can be what are called mesovortices, and a mesovortex is sort of a smaller scale circulation, a more localized circulation. And where those smaller swirls happen, there can be more damage. It can accentuate the damage. And I think a lot of times when people report seeing tornadoes in the eye walls of hurricanes, what they're talking about is that they saw some kind of a mesovortex or some kind of localized thing. Now, then that sort of raises the question, what's the difference between a mesovortex and a tornado? It's hard to say because they're both sort of like localized, sort of smaller circulations that can inflict very extreme damage. I'll just wrap it up by saying the eye wall of an intense hurricane is a very turbulent, crazy place, and it's hard sometimes to make sense of what's happening.
Well, and I totally agree with you. And I would say that if you did see something within the eye wall, you're really seeing a swirl. So whether or not that you want to call that a tornado, it's tornadic in nature, but it certainly is not going to last very long. And because the eye wall itself is the most violent. I mean, that's the craziest spot in the hurricane. And so it wouldn't surprise me that you would see swirls coming off that. It would think that that's a tornado, but certainly wouldn't last very long.
Yeah. And in the next 2 minutes here, while we're still on TV before we switch back to socials, let's give some viewers your best hurricane season advice. Maybe it's tips, maybe it's safety. You pick.
Okay, I'm going to go first because Josh is going to laugh because he knows I am Mr. Preparedness.
I knew it. Sorry.
You need to start doing things now. Make it your lifestyle. I don't care if you live on the coast or you live anywhere in the United States of America. We have disasters. So make it part of your just daily life that you're always working on your preparedness. So I don't want you to go out and spend a whole bunch of money at once, but you start with the things that will save your life, which is water and food that's necessary, and then you get things that make you more comfortable during those storms, which is very different. But you do something every month. When my wife and I did not have a lot of money, 1 month, all we got was a can opener. But trust me, a can opener can change your life if you have cans and you don't have a knife or something to get it. So do something now, make your plan, and then just start doing it naturally, and don't go crazy when a storm is coming. That's the worst time to get prepared. Josh, what's your advice?
Well, I'm going to really condense this. I have a lot to say about this topic.
Me too.
I just built a house that's very hurricane resistant, and so I've become very passionate about this topic, how to make your home hurricane resistant. And I'd say the 3 areas to look at are your roof, your windows, and your siding. And maybe in another segment I could talk in more detail about each of those. But the point is, with each of those areas of your house, of your existing home, you can do things to reinforce it, to make it better. And if you really cover all 3 of those areas, you're going to be good in a lot of really bad hurricanes.
Well, and we should say that Josh has a hurricane kind of coming out party at his house every year, and I'm going to be there on June 7th, and those are exactly the kinds of things that we're going to talk about. Hey, we're out of time on television. Click on the QR code if you'd like to join us live on our social media. And just like that, we're back on social media like nothing ever happened. So Josh, do you have anything else you wanted to say about your hurricane house, which, by the way, is such a smart thing to do because you live not that far from the Gulf itself. I mean, literally, you can see it. So tell us a little bit more about that preparation.
Well, like the 3 areas that I really care about: roof, windows, siding. So the roof, as I always say, if your roof rips off in a hurricane, it's game over.
Done.
But if it stays on, you'll be okay. So it's really important to have a good roof. I strongly recommend, if you live in a hurricane zone, a metal standing seam roof. Those are the kinds that I've seen stay on in crazy winds. But even if you don't have that kind of roof, there's things that you could do, to make sure that that roof is strapped on. Are there enough straps? Are there enough clips? Is the roof deck sealed? These are things that you can look at to sort of upgrade your roof. Then there's the windows. So the windows are the Achilles heel of a building or a home. You don't want wind breaking through, getting through a window and getting inside, because if wind gets inside the house, it's like a balloon. It's going to blow it up, cause more damage, more structural damage by getting in. So it's really important to seal the house up. Your two options are impact glass or a good shutter system. That's what I have. If not, you're going to have to board your windows, but that's really important, keeping the wind out. And then 3, just having really good siding. I live in an area that can get extreme wind, so I wanted a good impact resistant siding. And so I went with a fiber cement siding, which is more solid, stronger, more impact resistant than other kinds of materials, certainly more so than vinyl. My siding is like my coat of armor around my house.
Wow. I love that. And by the way, having built a house in the Houston area, one of the things that I was really good friends with my builder, and I said, oh, look, I want you to put extra anchors all around for the roof itself. So if anything else, I can lose this house, but that roof, I don't want it to come off. And so he did. So I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and while we're on this topic of just how to be better prepared, all the tips, let's talk about the situation arises and you're told to evacuate. People want to know, is it necessary that you evacuate to a different state? Where do you go? How far away?
That's a really good question, because no evacuations are the same. Is a weird way to put that. So if you're told to evacuate, first of all, rule number 1. If you're told to evacuate and you live in that zip code, get out, leave, just leave. It's not rocket science, just leave. However, where you go is a different story. Now you need to be a little bit more educated. So look where the storm is. You don't want to evacuate in the direction that the storm is going. And if you are terrified and you're not in a good frame of mind, you might make some bad choices on which directions to go. So that would be my first thing that I would say. Josh, what do you have to add to that? I'm sure you've got your opinions too.
Dr. Jim, I agreed with 2 things that you said. One is that no 2 evacuations are the same, so it's hard to make any kind of a generalization about where people should go. But another point you made that I want to kind of amplify is the idea of sort of not evacuating up the path of the hurricane. And I've seen this happen a few times. Unfortunate people they evacuated, and they actually, because of the angle that they went and the angle the hurricane was moving, where they evacuated to actually ended up getting more severe conditions than where they left. So it's good to know the direction of the hurricane, where's the core of the hurricane going, and then kind of moving at right angles away from it if you really don't want to ride out a hurricane.
So this is how far I've taken it with my planning with my family. So of course, I live outside of Denver now, up in the mountains, so I'm not in a hurricane place. But in Houston, in my plan, I literally had a binder, and I had 2 hotels, one in Dallas, one in San Antonio, that was our hurricane evacuation places. And every one of my family, anywhere in the country, knew that if we evacuated, we were either going to go to the north or go to that other hotel. And then, by the way, that was all on speed dial or on my apps. So when, of course, I'm not going anywhere. I need to send my family there, so I'm concerned of getting them there first. But everybody had the phone numbers of where they were going to go. And then we also had it on our app. So the moment when they said evacuation was about to happen, we already had our reservations. So while people are looking up for the phone or trying to look up where they were going to go, we would have our reservations. And not only me, but like the station manager, his wife hated hurricanes. And so if there was even a hint of a hurricane, she wanted to know from me where she should go. And she had a place in Dallas and she had a place in San Antonio, because they're 2 very different places. So that's how far I would take it, because you want people to know. And heaven forbid, if you do get hit by a hurricane, no service, and everything's wiped out, nobody can get a hold of anybody. The cell towers are down, you can't find anybody. But if your family knows your plan and you take it to that level, I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference, because everybody knows what you were going to do. And then if you're not there, then they also know that there probably is a problem.
Yeah, Dr. Jim, see, as passionate and sort of as crazy as I am about hurricanes, Dr. Jim is about preparing and just sort of like having a plan in place, supplies. This is Dr. Jim's area of obvious passion. You can see it.
Yeah, it is. But it's also fun. By the way,
I respect it.
Oh, I know. And by the way, you have snacks. Okay, I have 2 bags of snacks in our Go kits, our 72-hour kits, and they're filled with the kind of snacks that we love. Because if you have to go through a storm, if you have good snacks and good food, I swear it's better. Okay, I like Oreos. I like chocolate chip cookies. I don't want to eat some nasty health bar. Okay, especially in a hurricane. So if you think about those kinds of things, in fact, every 6 months, we empty out. In fact, even Taban has helped eat my snacks because we get rid of the snacks and we buy new ones every 6 months so that and everybody here knows. Everybody knows when it's going to happen because they come into my office because they know that I've got bags of snacks that they're going to want because I'm always updating that. And by the way, that's fun. It doesn't have to be serious. You can have fun with your plans, and that's why I do it.
Dr. Jim, it sounds to me like a hurricane is just an excuse for you to go on a junk food binge.
Look, that's what coming from a man that will go anywhere in the world to go in a hurricane. Okay, I think we both have. There's something going on up there.
Well, we're gonna leave it at that. You too.
Okay, I love it though.
Thanks for joining us this week on our town hall. Be sure to still ask us questions, Doctor and the Dude. We'll see you again later.